Hi guys, welcome back, and hopefully you got this part done. Hopefully you went up to here, so that's great. Now let's go to part two, and now we're actually going to cut some edges. Okay, so don't panic too much. What we're going to do is we're going to cut these edges first. So we can go to Edit Swift Loop, Swift Loop, and you can see we're able to actually cut these loops in, right? So if I go to Edit Swift Loop, so if you're in Editable Polygon mode, go to the ribbon menu here, go to Edit, go to Swift Loop, okay? And left click once, twice, 3, 4, and 5. So we got 5 lines, okay, in here. And right here, we're going to click once, twice, and 3. And up here, 1, 2, 3. So for those who don't understand why I did 5 here and 3 here, so the 3 and 3 here line up perfectly fine, right? But 5 here, that's one too many. Well, what we did was we created these loops here to match up with these vertexes up here, but we also created another loop that we can use afterwards, as well as making a vertex here that can connect here. So like I said, when it comes to polygons, we're just making sure that water flows. Okay, water flows. Okay. So now that we've created this, now we want to start welding these together. So we're starting to build up our simple shape, and we're like, okay, this is actually coming pretty good. I'm actually just going to use the collapse tool here, and I'm going to collapse these. And I'm going to collapse these together. Collapse these. And collapse these. Actually, what I might do is back up one step. Okay, sorry. Collapse the first 2 vertexes up here. So you see these first 2 vertexes? Make sure these ones are collapsed, but don't collapse the other ones after that, okay? My apologies. Just undo, back up a couple steps if you already did that. So collapse, collapse. Leave these 2 vertexes open. Because what we're going to do is we're going to create the nice flow with these ones, okay? So what you got to do here is collapse these 2 together. Collapse. Collapse. And collapse. So what you should end up with, after you're done collapsing everything, is this one right here as well. Sorry, I forgot that one. There you go. So this is the shape you should pretty much end up with in the end. And you can see that we're now building the cheek. We got the upper nose part here. And you should start adjusting the shape just a little bit. Okay, don't go too crazy with shaping it, but just focus on actually creating the actual cheek muscles. So hit F4. So your cheek isn't directly flat like this, right? If we go to Alt-X, and if you load up a reference of a different character or the same character, this is where the cheek starts. So the cheekbone starts here. So everything here should puff out just a little bit. Just a little bit. So what I end up doing is I end up puffing this out slightly. Now you can use soft selection for this as well if you don't work well taking one vertex at a time. I grab soft selection. I increase my soft selection a little bit. So that I grab a nice big part of the cheek. And let's say I grab from here. And I just puff this out a little bit forward. So grab as many vertexes as you need to create the puffy shape that you really want. And I increase my edge distance. And then I sort of just puff it out a little bit. Don't forget that we can keep adjusting this constantly, right? So we can just push this back a little bit. See, now you get that nice cheek puff here. So you can see that this cheek is actually starting to look pretty good on this side. And then what we want to do is go to our front view. And now we want to start playing around with the vertex shape and actually making sure that that cheek puffiness comes out in this front view too. So what I end up doing is I end up grabbing this. And I start grabbing it like that. So what I'm doing, and I'll turn off soft selection for a second so I can get this line here. So what I'm doing is I'm just adjusting the softness of the cheek based upon what I think. So don't forget that if you feel the muscles on your face, some muscles start going downwards, then there's kind of, it softens up to the cheek going up. and then like from here it's downwards. Like you could feel it on your face. If not, look up a bunch of references of like older men with wrinkles or older women with wrinkles. This part goes downwards and this part starts sliding upwards. So that's what we're trying to simulate. We're simulating a puffed out cheek that will slowly slide downwards into the rest of our face. So once you get the rest of our face, you'll definitely start seeing those changes as we go along here. So we want to try and soften this shape up too. So you can see like it's getting a little harsh here, but we don't want this harshness. We want it to be more soft. So basically what I'm doing, I'm just doing minor adjustments to make sure this line flows. Same thing with this line, make sure it flows. Nice flow, nice flow. And then I make sure that this here looks good. So I might give this a slight adjustment because if you think about a nose and the side of the cheek here, it would probably curve a little bit inwards. So I'm just going to do that, slight adjustments. So when it comes to modeling, it's a lot about these slight tweaks, right? So basically what I'm going into is I'm just building the shapes of how I perceive that this character should look. And this is just a matter of something that you'll learn on the fly as well, right? So don't panic if you're not getting the results you want right away. This takes a lot of practice. So I go to my front view, and right now I'm giving the eyebrow the curve that I'm looking for too as well. Remember that everything is kind of thick in the front, right? Look how it was before. Your brow, your front of your face, your brows is more flat here. So we definitely need to flatten this up just a little bit. Not too flat, just a little bit like that. So now you can see that definitely looks a lot better. And I know that they're not welded yet, so I'm not going to panic that they don't look like totally flat together. But I'm just going to scale and make sure they overlap each other just like that. And you can see we got this nice shape coming along. So we still have to build out the nostril and stuff like that. So the next step that we have to do is we're actually going to, we'll step away from the nose for a second, and we're going to build out the rest of the face here. We're actually going to extrude these edges. So grab these edges here, and as long as they still look good in your side view, make sure they look good in your side and your front view. Okay, lift these up right here. And then what I want you to do next is grab these two here, make sure they look good in the side view as well, and I want you to extrude them outwards as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab these two vertexes up here, these two, and we're going to collapse them together. And then we're going to grab these two here and collapse them as well. So basically what I'm doing is I'm making sure that everything's kind of welded, everything's kind of looking okay, and I'm softening out my shape still a little bit here to make sure the eye looks okay. And you can see, it's starting to look good together, good already. We're starting to put together the actual eye shape, looking pretty okay. So you can adjust the smoothing groups if you want to smooth it out a bit more. And don't forget that, like, I know a lot of you are like, oh, it doesn't look good and stuff like that. Once we add turbo smooth to something like this, like a model like this, and make it really soft, you can see how much softer it looks, right? So don't add turbo smooth yet, but I just want you to know that, not to panic. This isn't going to be low poly forever. This is just something we're working on. Okay, so next step I want you to do is we're going to introduce a triangle into this, and I know like some of you may panic a little bit because we're definitely adding in a triangle, and it doesn't seem like it'd be all right. But just bear with me a second, right? So what we want to do next is we're going to extrude one more time. We're going to extrude, and then we're going to add in a new loop starting with a triangle. So I'm going to extrude this in like this. So I just extruded these out, and I'm going to scale them outward slightly so they get a little wider. And then I'm going to extrude these ones out as well, just like we did before, same thing. And then I'm going to scale them out just a little bit. Like that. And now I'm going to collapse them. These right here. Where's my collapse tool? There it is. Collapse. And the same thing with this one. So what you should have is two edges left in the middle here, center of the face. All the other ones are starting to pop out a bit more. And don't forget, we want to change these on the side view too, right? So first thing we're going to do is we're going to extrude this triangle shape here. So I'm just going to build this down like this, like this, like this. So I'm doing my adjustments first. So I want something that looks more like this shape. Because what we're going to start doing is we're starting to seal off this eye now. Okay? So I'm going to go to Edge, Extrude. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to collapse this lonely vertex into this one. So what I end up having is a triangle. And that's fine. I'm going to collapse this triangle here, and then I'm going to collapse this here. Because your eye is really sharp, if you especially feel around that eye, there's no other shape that I would use other than a triangle for this. And when we put mesh smooth on here, don't worry, it'll create a polygon out of this, right? So right now we need to do our vertex adjustments to make sure this looks more like an eyeball. Right now, it's close, but your eye doesn't really look like that. We need to pop this back a little bit to make it look more like the skin is nice and flowing. And we need to start pushing these a little bit more forward. So like that. Because this is starting to form your brow now, right? So if your character has an angry brow, this would actually go lower and be an angry brow. So, but we got a nice soft brow here. And a good thing to do, especially if you're going to start doing this like definitely more professionally and you want to keep working on something like this, is to just feel your own face a lot and start looking at a lot of references of people's faces and see where their like skin pops out more, where the skin goes in. Remember, what you're doing is basically creating with clay. You're basically molding the shape of someone's actual face using vertexes. So that's what we're doing, is we're just going to adjust these vertexes, make it soft. We have a female face right now that's pretty soft. But if your character has a lot of hard edges, obviously that needs more vertexes, more detail. Just play around with a little bit so you make sure your vertexes are nice and nice looking all around your mesh. So I'm just making sure that everything kind of looks okay. I'm just doing my slight adjustments. I look at it from the side view. The side view looks pretty good. I'd say this actually looks very, very good to start with. And I'm going to put that all to my same smoothing group. That looks pretty good. And I look through my front view. That looks good. If it's starting to look like a mask, that's actually a good thing, because it's like that's the start to an actual face. So we got the actual start here looking pretty good. It's all lined up in the front and the side view. So I'm pretty content with that. So the next step we want to do is start building out the actual nose structure. So we got two edges here, and what we're going to do is we're going to start building out the actual nose. And I can see here that I would require one extrusion to get to this edge and two extrusions. So I'm going to grab these two edges here, and I'm just going to hold shift and extrude them forward, and then move them like this, and then extrude one more time. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to scale those edges just in the x-axis so it flattens them out, and make sure they line up correctly, like so. And now I'm going to kind of line them up with the last edges that we had here. So I'm going to do some rotation. I'm going to grab these two edges here and make sure they match up as well, and do my rotation. We can add a little bit more space here, because remember, your nose is going to get a little bit wider as it goes down. So something like this. And make sure to adjust your vertexes in the front view too. Depending on the shape you want your nose, you want this to be pushed in a little bit. So something like that. And now don't forget to collapse those vertexes. And if I go to polygon and I put them in the same group, we see what happens. We're getting that nice edge. And you can see that the nose is pretty sharp right now. So that's up to you to do some adjustments with, right? Don't forget that, like I said before, the front of your face is actually pretty flat. Like the front part of your nose is actually pretty, like much more flat than that. So what we need to do is start pushing these a little bit forward. So this. And what you get is definitely a much softer looking nose than it did a second ago. Now this sharp shape will be smoothened out when we attach these models together, so don't worry so much. It's as long as it's not very, very like anime nose sharp, right? So now we got a nice brim to the nose. You can do your adjustments. Just do some slight adjustments here to how you perceive the nose being. Something like that. Looks okay. So what we can see now is we have a nice little eye socket here. We got a nice nose coming down. We got a nice cheek that obviously, we can touch up a little bit more and adjust. But remember, like I said before, this is going to be the wide part of the cheek, and we can continue this. But this part should be going downwards, right? Because this is going to make our chin. This actually part, if you feel your skin, you can feel that part of your cheek actually starts going downward and starts lowering into your chin. You can almost feel that loop inside the muscles. If you want, just look at muscle structures inside a group. You can also look up other people's modeling references as well. But this is, I'd say this is pretty spot on for exactly how we need this to look to build out. I'm going to push this actually a little bit more forward. That. So let's go to the next step now. So what we want to do now is we're going to just make sure this looks good, make sure this looks good, this looks good. Everything kind of looks good. So what I'm going to do is just take a look at this entire model for a second to make sure we kind of have this all right. And what I want next step is I'm going to do a big extrusion. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to grab all these edges here, all these edges, and I'm not going to extrude by moving. I'm going to extrude by scaling actually. So what I'm going to do is hold shift on the scale tool and then go outwards. And then I'm going to move these a little bit so they match up in the middle. And then I'll do my adjustments here. So what I'll do is I'll bring this back here, bring this back, and we're just going to create that nice loop around our model. But it's pretty much going to like touch starting to touch the edge of our drawing here. So if you're drawing out your own model that you're working from, just be sure that at this point we're starting to get closer to the edge of the actual face itself. And we're just circling and doing the adjustments here like this, like that. And you can see from our side view, we have this here. We got to pop this back slightly. Because what we're doing is, you can see, we're going to start building out a lot of the cheek here. So we're definitely pushing this far back a lot. Something like this. Yeah, this looks pretty good in my opinion. And then we're going to do one more extrusion just at the very top. So just at these top polygons here. Once you have a nice look to this part with the triangle, and then we have this, I'm going to actually curve this out a bit just to make sure it forms a kind of a nicer look here. Something like that. There you go. Just making sure it's like a nicer curve. And then that. Just kind of making sure everything kind of looks good, has this nice curve. You can see just these slight adjustments help quite a bit, right? So the next step, what I'll do is I'm going to take these edges here, just these 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 edges here, and I'm going to extrude them upwards. So what I'm doing is I'm just starting on the forehead here. So one extrusion here. I'm going to lower this just a little bit, just so we can start on the forehead. Just a slight scale so everything kind of lines up a bit. And then my next step afterwards is I build up more of the forehead. Now the forehead takes up a large part of the body, and we're going to do some more adjustments to it afterwards. But we're just making sure these vertexes are kind of there so that we can use. Now you can see we have a bulge popping out of the forehead, and we need to adjust that. So that's where we go around and we start playing around with our vertexes, and we start adjusting this so that there is no bulge. It's going to start looking more like, a normal human head. And so with some slight adjustments, definitely looking better. And don't forget to like smooth this out as well. Now that we're getting closer here, we should have a shape that kind of looks like it's moving towards the back of the head. You can see we got this nice shape here going out. There you go. That's coming together actually quite well. So we got our forehead coming together. There's no bulge in it, I don't think. No, everything looks pretty good. We got the brows in there, which are looking okay. Yeah, and the model's looking pretty good overall. Not too bad. So what we want to do now, next step, before we close off this part of the video, is we're going to add the eyeballs in. And the eyeballs are really just, 2 spheres. So what we do is we're going to create one sphere. And basically what you want to do is just grab this sphere and you want to push it to the front of your model. Kind of like that, just so it pops out a little bit. Remember, your eye actually comes out of your eye socket slightly, right? So basically I push it to about, let's say, that point. And you can copy this eyeball on the other side. Just make sure it like lines up. So I'm seeing that this line here. about like that. I just make it as a reference. So what this allows me to do with these two eyes here, now that I can start seeing how these eyes look, I could see where the I have to push back the skin here to match the eyeball. I need to push some parts outwards. So now it's time to do our slight adjustments. So what we need to do, the reason why we keep them spheres is so that we can always rotate these eyes on a constant basis. So if they need animating, we can actually point these eyes in any direction that we want. So basically, I'm going to reduce these down to 25 segments. So this eyeball should be about 25 segments. It's a pretty simple eyeball. So now we're going to do is we're just going to adjust these vertexes. So we just grab these. Now before you start modifying the vertexes right now to match the eyeball, don't forget that our final model is actually going to have our mesh smooth or turbo smooth on it. So put turbo smooth on it before you adjust, and now go to vertex mode, and now adjust these vertexes around the eyeball. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm in vertex mode, and I'm just going to grab maybe a couple vertexes here, pull these out a bit more, pull these out. So this is just a lot of adjustment. So just do your adjustments. You can see I'm just doing my simple adjustments here. I'm taking a look at my different camera views, and I have to do my adjustments. You can see this needs to be adjusted slightly. There you go. That's looking pretty good. So basically my main adjustment point is to try and get this part going backwards. So I'm just going to pop this like really back here. And there you go. So now you get your eyeballs, and they're now covered. There may be a little opening, so just keep doing your adjustments there. So for me, I still have some slight adjustments to do here. Now it doesn't have to be perfect because like obviously your mesh smooth and everything else isn't going to overlap completely, but just try and make it as close as possible. As close as possible is what we're aiming for here. Just make sure that everything looks like it fits together nice. You can see like I got a nice fit here now between our models. This is actually looking fairly good. And now we're going to move on to the next step afterwards. So place your eyes, get the front of the face done, and now we're going to move on to the next step, and we're going to try and get pretty much the back of the head and wrap around the entire head, and we're going to start in next pieces. Cool? This is going to be long, so stick with me here.